Welcome to the Fantasy Fangirls Podcast, where two sisters dive deep into beloved fantasy lore, characters, themes, series, and more.
I'm Lexi, older sister and fantasy lore nerd.
I'm Nicole, younger sister and romantic at heart.
And today is episode 6 of Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros, where we are covering chapters 28 through 33. But before we begin this deep dive episode, please listen closely to our spoiler warning. Every episode has spoilers for the entire Empyrean series, all of Onyx Storm, Iron Flame, and Fourth Wing, which means even though this episode 6 focuses on chapters 28 through 33, we are pulling in themes, lore, foreshadowing, and so much more from the entire book.
So if you don't know that this episode, we will be seeing a little girl with the same hair as Violet Sorrengail, and it probably caused all of our hearts to stop beating when we read it, then please go finish Onyx Storm. We will be here when you're done.
Next, we at Fantasy Fangirls are adults who say adult things about adult books. In other words, friends, this podcast is rated R.
Blood is the sacrifice, fighting and daggers and gore. Oh my! So please do be mindful of those little listening ears.
Additionally, we are so excited to see you at upcoming live events. We will be featured guests at Enchanticon in St. Louis, Missouri, August 15th through 17th.
We will be at the Everflame Ball along with Penn Cole for the first ever Kindred's Curse Saga Ball on August 30th in Castle Rock, Colorado. Then we will also be back at the Dragon Gauntlet in Boise City, Michigan, September 12th through 13th.
Then Romantasy BookCon in Orlando, Florida from October 23rd through 25th.
Check out our website for more information to all of these events.
Last thing before we jump into this Onyx Storm episode 6, if you love Fantasy Fangirls and want more Empyrean themed events, more content, more community, and so much more, please check out Fantasy Fan Club.
We have 3 tiers that you can join. The Cadets, which includes access to our Boppin' Discord, live Q&As from Lexi and I, a book club, exclusive author interviews. We just interviewed Callie Hart, who wrote Quicksilver. It was amazing. We also have trivia, community events, promo codes for live events, plus 20% off all merch. That is for $6 a month. Or you can join the Dragon Riders, which includes everything from the cadet level, plus early access to ad-free episodes, our full episode outlines, and special voting privileges for $10 a month. Then we have the Iron Squad, which includes everything from the previous 2 tiers, plus more behind-the-scenes content, a welcome gift, giveaways. Like, for instance, a lucky winner just won a signed Quicksilver from Callie Hart. Private Discord channel, and your name shouted out on the podcast. That is for $25 a month.
Join the party at fantasyfangirls.com/fan club. The link is also in the show notes. And really and truly, thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts for supporting us as we've turned this podcast into our livelihood. It's all because of you.
And now it is time to go against Navarian leadership again and travel to the Isle of Dune.
To start off every episode, Nicole does us the honor of summarizing what happens in this stretch of chapters. So listen up, because Battle Brief is in session for chapters 28 through 33 of Onyx Storm.
Chapter 28. The crew is back at Besgaeth with Battle Brief business as usual, and the second squad tries to catch up, and Riddick tries to catch some tail, but Devere calls them out. And what better way to kill the mood than to spill some Dark Wielder tea? The Venin are on the move, and they somehow know about the Aeration wards falling. Dun dun dun! Montage! After a week of intense training, it's time for more Signet sparring, and Professor Carr is in a mood! Apparently, roasting your own students is a-okay at Besgaeth. I mean, really, who's surprised? While they are reading up on the Venin with some very sus books that, yes, we will be going through one by one. The Iron Squad first years waltz on up, demanding that they get to help. And like every good, overconfident freshie, they pull out every argument that they could think of. And it was just enough to get some clerical work. Just as the squad is in the weeds with their travel plans, a scream pierces the air. Heads whip towards the mat just in time to watch a second year from Claw section pull from the source. Carr does not think twice before driving an alloy hilted dagger into her heart, leaving her dead. Chapter 29. It's time to say goodbye to Halden, because he's, well, being Halden and already causing issues before they've even taken off. But wait, it's a bird. It's a plane. No, it's Arik Greycastle, and he's ready to step into the role of reluctant royal representative. Sorry, not sorry, Halden, but you've been kicked off of Iron Squad. Good riddance to the douche canoe prince! You will only be missed because of Lexi's incredible insulting names for you. After a long 8 days of travel, the riot finally touches down in Umbriel, with only a short-lived rest before they are woken up suddenly by Umbriel soldiers ready to strike them down. But it's all good. They've got swords. And no, I am not referring to Zaddy's penis. Chapter 30, pulling out his grade A tongue skills for talking, dirty mind you, Xaden gets the soldiers to allow them to fight for an audience with the queen. And after picking her chosen few, Violet and co. follow the cavalry into the unknown. That was not as good as Elsa's. 2 hours later, the crew follows the Umbrielites into the primary temple, and holy shit, it's huge. That's what she said. Violet doesn't get to admire it for long before a group of temple attendants step into view, and what the fuck? Every single one has silver hair, and no, they are not in their Kim K silver hair era. Chapter 31. No time to process. It's time to boogie oogie, and by boogie, I mean fight, and by fight, I mean a trial to test their worthiness. All I can think of is Aang having to fight for the opportunity to talk to King Boomy. No offense, Marlies, but you and Boomy are literally cousins. Chapter 32. Back to the trial. Xaden, Dane, and Violet are all chosen to compete, and things are not looking good. Dane is knocked out. Xaden's got a knife held to his throat, and Violet is totally not wielding lightning. Violet must be praying to Zanal because even the odds and weight class were stacked against her, but she fucking took her challenger down. Did I mention she was fighting the queen herself? Yeah, great start to a perfectly healthy alliance. Violet asks the queen the question that she's been dying to know. Can you help us? Pretty please. Queen Marlies agrees. If Violet can pay the price she wants what all the Isles crave, dragons. Chapter 33, Part 1. The Queen of Umbriel hits Violet with a, but wait, there's more! She doesn't want any dragons. No, this bitch wants a full dozen eggs. Do you know how much those cost these days? Fair to say, it was an overwhelming hell no! Heading back to camp, Mira wants to play 20 questions with Violet. And being the queen of Delulu, Violet ignores all the flashing signs of something is going on here. But just like every other bomb dropped in this episode, there is no time to process. And that's it for this week's episode of Isle Hopping. Tune in next week for Chapter 33, Part 2, with a special Hedotus episode featuring Who's My Mommy? Herself, Talia.
There's no better feeling than just hopping into bed at the end of a long day. And today's sponsor, Miracle Made, makes curling up in your sheets even more wonderful.
These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresher 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. Using silver-infused fabrics inspired by NASA, Miracle Made sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, no matter the weather. So you get a better night's sleep every single night.
Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands and feel as nice, if not nicer, than sheets used by some 5-star hotels. I just feel so nice and cozy in my Miracle Made sheets.
Go to trymiracle.com/FF to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code FF at checkout, you also get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%.
All right, writers, it's time to don our signet power and discuss key insights, character analysis, lore, foreshadowing theories, and so much more. 3 days after the disastrous but still productively successful trip to Deverelli, Quest Squad is back at Bisgayeth and in battle brief. They push their limits to return in a timely manner. And as a welcome back, Daddy Atos ordered them straight to class. Who's surprised by this dick finding out one more little way to show he's in authority and make them miserable? But at least beforehand, Violet was able to hide her father's books she retrieved from Deverelli and confirm with Imogen that Jack is still alive. Yay! Today's class topic, the fall of Valia, a mid-sized city 200 miles west of the Bay of Malak. In the 8 days our crew was on the mission to Deverelli, Signison's flyers have finally arrived at Bisgayeth. Quick reminder that during initial negotiations between Pormiel and Navarre, Signison was the Poromish province most ready to walk. After Violet and Squad adjusted the Bisgayeth wardstone to allow flyers to wield within Navarre, the 2 kingdoms agreed to allow the Poromish flyers to attend Bisgayeth. So both riders and flyers are learning and training together as a united front to prepare for the fight against the Venin. Signison's flyers were taking quite some time to join everyone else at Bisgayeth, though, for reasons we don't know, but Nicole has a few theories.
Yes, I do. Does anyone else think that it is super sus that just when the Venin are showing direction of a change of tactic, which we'll talk about more in a second, that's when the Signisen flyers finally show up? It's almost like the Venin were holding out, including holding back the Signisen flyers. And now that they have a plan and they're moving in on all fronts, they're literally moving in on all fronts, equaling that Signisen is definitely not working with our side. I'm so stressed. Also, when Riddick is flirting with a third-year Signisen flyer, it's not until Riddick admits being part of Quest Squad that the flyer then turns around and gives him a flash of interest. Could this be because he's flirting? Of course, Riddick's hot, but also could this be because he just learned who's on the squad, and that's good intel for who he reports back to. Tegasaur, also on our Discord, brought up a brilliant point. Because what if they were being held back because they weren't glamored yet, or they weren't at the level where they were able to hide in more plain sight, or they just weren't ready yet as a unit? Also, Cygnus in Greek mythology is often connected to swans, normally resulting in getting turned into a swan. Swans are a symbol of wisdom and all that, so I don't really know if that's connected. But if I've learned anything from Jess Mariano of Gilmore Girls, swans can also fuck your shit up real fast. So swans are sus, just like Signisen. That's the first of many of my theories today.
Okie dokie. During class, Violet quietly catches the rest of Second Squad up on what happened in Deverelli. Well, except for the whole Xaden found a way to channel somewhere he was supposed to be safe from magic, which, yes, is a fact that haunts Violet. Her friends are particularly interested in how Deverelli boasts neutrality, but they have an army, who they call guards, and weaponry to trade. Like we talked about at the end of episode 5, King Cortland wants to enlist Violet in Xaden's services. Kat notes how it's weird Deverelli wants them as weapons since their signets don't work on an isle without magic. Little does Kat know, Xaden demonstrated his powerful shadow wielding at the king's palace, and Violet kept the ruse by encouraging the king to believe they can still somehow use their signets on the isle without magic, when in secret actuality, Xaden withdrew power from the imbued alloy, effectively pulling from power that was not his to take.
If the Iron Squad second years are done talking to each other, we have a very important class going on. Devera calls on Violet specifically to look at the change in troop movement from the Venin. If you will recall from episode 2 of Onyx Storm, the Venin have been moving up from the Barrens, up the Stonewater River, which separates the two southernmost Poromil provinces, Breivik and Krovla. Then all of their movements have been spreading around the ward line, just like they are looking for weaknesses within the Navarian wards. That's bad! Now, some of those previous red flags are gray on the map, which I take to mean that Venin have abandoned that area. And the red flags are moving southwest towards Krovla, the southernmost province of Poromil. This is also where Takaris resides in Cordon. Why all of this southwestern movement? Once the wards were raised, even just partially back in Iron Flame, the Venin left their more southern conquered towns like Pavis, which is in Krovla, and concentrated more of the Navarian border in prep for their strike on the Besgaeth Wardstone and thus the true hatching grounds. This was at the end of Iron Flame. But that mission failed, as we all have read, and they've been at a standstill for a little over 3 months. This standstill for Venin, they're still attacking, just they're not moving anywhere. This new movement shows that they've got a new strategy. Violet's guess on that strategy? They know the wards will fall in Eratia. But how? The inside snitch strikes again. This very easily could be info Panchek gave Berwyn. I'm leaning more towards this one considering the ending. This also could be Xaden accidentally leaking the information via the Venin hive mind. It's why he did not want to know info at the very beginning of this book. It also could be someone else because I don't think Panchek is the only snitch. Remember Signisen! Never forget! I'm so stressed.
I think that this one might be mostly Panchek, but I hear you that he is not the only one who is the cause of some of these issues.
Agreed. Definitely agreed. And Signisen is up there on my list as well. I also want to throw out that they could be moving the southwestern troops towards Cordon. After all, it is very odd that this high seat of power is still standing completely undrained. But where there's a question, there is a theory. Kelsita13 sent us a message on Instagram wondering if there's a possible wardstone at Takaris's. In chapter 21 of Onyx Storm, Mira, quote, pauses at the base of the white steps, looking down at the black pillar barely visible in the level below us through the open staircase. Could this black pillar be a wardstone? I love this idea, very possibly. And it would have to have very different runes on it that somehow negate Violet's feeling of stepping into the wards. Remember how whenever she steps into or leaves them, there's almost this like, oh, I feel the feeling of magic leaving me or coming back into me. Wink. And Xaden's also pretty stressed still in Corden without the wards helping him. So I so badly want to believe that Corden is going to be safe because this black pillar is very interesting and I feel like it's definitely an Easter egg, but I am inclined to think that this highlighting of Corden in the scene is more foreshadowing for Corden's eventual downfall. Womp womp.
I'm in the same boat as you with that. I also want to point out that Mira has been to Corden several times, and as a walking ward herself, it's interesting that she never takes note of it. In fact, I believe in Iron Flame, she commented that she's not useful because she can't create her own wards outside of the wards. So,
okay, playing devil's advocate real quick, because I agree with you, but the line I just pulled from chapter 21 is Mira pauses at the base of the white steps. So she could be pausing because she's seeing a ward and she's like, that feels different. Because here's the deal. It would have to be a very different type of ward.
I know a lot of people did pick up on that black pillar there, and it is interesting.
It's definitely an Easter egg. I just don't know what for.
All right, friends, we got a montage. Over the next week, Violet works harder than ever in the midst of also being more worried about Xaden than ever. I think the reality of his situation as a turned Venin is starting to really sink in for her. At the beginning of the book, we talked about how Violet was in some denial, not with the fact that Xaden was Venin in general, but about the repercussions of being Venin and how it has been changing him. Now, she's realizing that he very well may reach the point of no return where the redness in his eyes doesn't fade, when such a thought of him progressing was inconceivable to her weeks ago. Violet keeps herself occupied as she attends class, pushes burnout as she independently trains her signet, freezes her booty off during flight maneuvers, practices with a mini crossbow, works out with Imogen, reads her dad's books on the Isles, and participates in signet sparring, which has rotating professors like Kara and Garrick while Professor Zaddy is taking care of business in Orisha. Oh, and also we can't forget listening to Teenage Andarna bitch about Taryn. My goodness, even listing off everything Violet's up to is exhausting. She is a busy lady. All the while, she and the squad continue reading whatever they can about the Venin and the Isles. Like Riddick is currently going through the continent's most redacted volume on Umbriel's warlike customs. By the way, I would be fascinated to compare the differences between this book and Papa Sorrengail's book on Umbriel, which Violet is sneakily reading right now.
Ree is given a book on weather patterns throughout the Isles. Given how much this affects griffins and their flight longevity, this feels like really important work that Ree is doing. Especially because once you reach a certain latitude, the wind shifts from pushing them into a headwind, which is a complete no-go for griffins. Violet is reading her father's book about the trial by combat in Umbriel. Again, super helpful. She notes that there are noticeable differences between this Isle book that he wrote when he was 23 versus the mysterious Papa Sorrengail's research. Yeah, for multiple reasons. One, he was a young scribe working on the Isles research, and he was just honing in on his craft. And two, I think about this like the difference between our Fourth Wing outlines and this one.
Yes.
Quite the opposite. And two, his research manuscript is laden with mystery and double meanings. And let's be real, he's seen some shit by the time he's working on the manuscript when he's a lieutenant colonel.
And to clarify, the manuscript is the Second Crowland Uprising research. Yeah. And Bodhi is reading a collection of early fables from Breivik. Note the different reading assignments they each have, presumably from Violet. Riddick and Ree are focused on Isle research for Quest Squad, and Bodhi is trying to find a cure for Venin for obvious secret reasons. I love how he's, quote, looking for tales of dark wielders cured by love, or good deeds, or dancing naked under a full moon after drinking the venom of a rare snake only found on the farthest isle during a lunar eclipse. It's a great little way of inserting humor to show Violet's desperation to find something, anything that can potentially help Xaden.
And hold up, because after last episode, I cannot get the idea that Xaden is somehow connected to the goddess of love, Loyal. I just can't get that idea out of my head. And here it says, quote, Dark Wielders cured by love. Could this be an Easter egg for Loyal being part of the cure process? I don't think it would be entirely the cure process, but part of it. That would be just like Rebecca Yarros, to drop even a sliver of the cure in a sentence that is followed by, quote, dancing naked under a full moon after drinking the venom of a rare snake only found on the farthest isle during a lunar eclipse. Like, she loves to drop important info and then distract us with something else.
Just throwing it out here, isn't the Isle of Loyal one of the furthest isles too?
Yeah, it is.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Interesting.
Then there's Quinn, who is reading a volume Queen Mariah sent on venin and their medicinal uses. There this is again. What the hell are venin medicinal uses? I have so many questions. Like, how in the world can a venin be used for medicinal purposes, for starters there? Like, their blood? Something about their power? Like, how? And what exactly are they used for? Like, poison antidotes? The common cold? Burnout? I have no idea. I am throwing spaghetti at the wall. But I am absolutely convinced that these clinical study mentions must be Easter eggs for something to come in the future.
Yeah, I have a million questions, absolutely zero answers. I do wonder what would happen if a mender turned venin. So maybe that, like you mentioned burnout, and I was thinking like, oh, like maybe a mender venin could somehow be used but like medicinal uses implies that there's like a substance, right? It's not a magic, but maybe I'm thinking to real life for that, which is very rare that I'll be doing this episode. Wow. Violet also has questions for Bodhi, but at least he has some fucking answers. Lowering her voice so that no one else can hear, she asks him what his second signet is. And he says, quote, don't have one, just like Xaden. Skirt! Because these 6 words have caused this fandom to absolutely spiral. And it all comes down to the question of, is he telling the truth? Xaden does not have a known about second signet. He does, obviously, but Bodhi most likely does not know about it. So this very much could be a just like Xaden situation, and Bodhi's second signet is super hidden away, just like Xaden's.
And Rebecca confirmed that Violet is the only one who knows about Xaden's secret. In the recent Variety article, there was a question about the meaning of this exact line from Bodhi, and she answered that Violet is the only one who knows about Xaden's second signet.
There is the possibility that Xaden doesn't know if Bodhi has figured out his second signet. Bodhi does have the power of countering signets, so he could have sensed Xaden using his second signet, and he's just kept it hush-hush for the same reason Xaden has. He doesn't want his cousin to be murdered because that's what happens to Intrinsics. Like I said, I am inclined to believe that Bodhi here is actually referring to not having a second signet for multiple reasons. One, if we look at everything around Bodhi's character, him not having a second signet feels so on brand. Bodhi has forever been living in Xaden's shadow, always second best, never thought of first, especially given how he lights up at even the possibility of going on the next expedition. He also consistently feels less than, and not having been given that extra power could be a result of that I'm not as good as Garrick or others. Or Imogen. Although this is not to say that Cure, Bodhi's green swordtail, didn't bond a direct descendant. And this is where I believe Bodhi's story is going, and I don't like it. We know from last book that if you bond a dragon who has previously bonded a direct ancestor of yours, you could either get a second signet or you could go mad. I fully believe, A, that we're going to see someone go mad. I think it's going to be someone who we know, and the only 2 options are Bodhi or Sloane. And I'm really leaning towards Bodhi in that case. If he is the brother at the end, he will also be a venin who can counter signets, who is mad. Bad news bears.
So I agree with you on the storytelling side of things, where that would be really interesting for his character. However, I'm still not convinced about this going mad theory for Bodhi, partly because I don't believe there are that many direct descendant dragons to bond. Like, there's only so many of them that there can be, so not all of the marked ones are going to be bonded to a direct descendants dragon. And I feel like he would have gone mad a while ago, like when his second signet should have manifested. Violet made a comment about how Xaden seems pretty sane to her when she confronted him about having a second signet. So while no one knows, I'm under the impression if he was the one to go mad, it would have already happened, and not 2.5 years after he bonded a dragon. I don't know. I'm still on high alert for someone to go mad because that is not a nugget of information that is dropped and never comes back in the series. But it all depends on when they would go mad because, again, I think that it would have been sooner.
I also want to throw out the possibility that Xaden's grandfather could have been Bodhi's grandfather as well. Because if
you're going to make me pull out my family tree again.
At least you don't have to figure out mystery grandmama this time. But I do think that if that is the case, then yes, Cure would not have bonded a direct ancestor of Bodhi's.
Overall, I am with you that Bodhi is telling the truth here and he does not have a second signet. Like you were saying, one of the themes this series explores and that Rebecca has been very forthcoming about is the balance of power. Who gets it, who gets more, and what happens for those who don't have as much. Not all of the marked ones have a second signet. Many do, but like Xaden alluded to in chapter 12, not every marked one does. So it feels unrealistic for all of the marked ones that we know and love to have a second signet. Like you said, it makes a lot of sense for Bodhi's character to not have a second signet, and it's one more reason for him to feel less than. So I guess maybe I'm in the minority and think he genuinely doesn't know that Xaden has a second signet. I read the way he says, just like Xaden, as twofold. Yes. Number one, it's his subtle way of purposefully singling the two of them out as not having second signets, leaving Violet to be able to infer others like Garrick, who he looks over to in this moment, and even Imogen do. It's Bodhi doing a wink, wink, nudge, nudge that they're the only two in the circle of friends who only have one. And number two, knowing what we know about how much Bodhi looks up to Xaden, I think it is comforting for him to be able to put him and Xaden in the same category. Others might be badass with two signets, but he and his cousin Xaden each only have one signet, again, that he knows of. That's something they can share together, and I bet that is uplifting for him when they're surrounded by friends who do have two. Before we continue this conversation, we want to take a quick moment to tell you about today's sponsor, Function. As we go through life, it can be easy to put important health maintenance on the back burner, but now we are testing with Function throughout the year. Function is an all-in-one health platform that starts with over 100 advanced lab tests covering your entire body: heart, hormone, liver, kidneys, thyroid, autoimmunity, cancer signals, toxins, nutrients, and more.
Function Health is about taking control of your health through data. Instead of guessing what is happening inside of your body, Function helps you know for sure, providing you access to over 100 advanced lab tests. For instance, this past Monday, I went ahead and got my first Function lab. I'm getting another one next week, and I'm so excited because this is not something I would have ever done if it weren't for the ease of Function Health. Your first set of tests helps you establish your baseline of health, giving you a starting point to compare future tests against. This makes it easy to spot changes, even subtle ones, and address them proactively.
Health is universal. Function Health is for anyone who wants to understand their body better and make informed decisions for a longer, healthier life. Function does currently have a waitlist, but they are offering our audience the chance to skip it. Huzzah! Head to functionhealth.com/FFG or enter code FFG when signing up to skip that waitlist. When the first years arrive to Signet Sparring, they have a declaration for the rest of Second Squad pouring over their books right now. They've come to help with all this research. And by the way, Second Squad's first years comprise of Lynx, Baylor, Evelyn, Sloan, Arik, and Kai, who is the only flyer of the group. While the older cadets argue that the first years should stay focused on the difficulties of just, being a first year, the first years push back. After all, Violet and her year squad mates wouldn't have accepted the same answer when they were first years. In fact, Violet and Liam didn't. When a battle was literally in front of them, they made the choice to fight. So that's the same choice that these first years are making. They want to help however they can, even if it is just helping devour as many books as possible so this squad is armed with knowledge and are prepared for the upcoming fight, whatever it might look like. Well, dang, valid point, first years. And also, I love seeing this character development from Sloan since we were introduced to her in Iron Flame, where she blamed Violet for her brother's death, and now she accepts that he made his choice, and here she is making hers too.
I also love the parallels between Sloan and Violet just from this scene. Sloan is dealing with the fear of her signet, because the first time she really intentionally used it, or at least we saw on the page, she partook in someone's death. And here, Sloan asks Violet if she would train her signet if it was only used to destroy things and kill people. Yeah, this sounds kind of familiar because back in Fourth Wing during War Games, this was the exact dilemma that Violet had to face head on. She used her signet really for the first time, sort of ish, and someone was, major air quotes, killed as a result. It turns out that JFB just wouldn't stay dead, but still the sentiment was the same. But Violet was panicked with thoughts of being only a weapon and being used for murder. It wasn't until Xaden came in to tell her that she is not a weapon, but the weapon that can save many, many lives as a result. But Sloane doesn't really have a Xaden yet to come in and say that to her, but one will. And it just so happens to be another fourth wing leader, Dane Atos.
Exactly. And as Dane will explain to Sloane about her signet, quote, "You're the artery power chooses to flow through. Your life." Chills. Convinced that these first years are indeed entitled to their choice of helping, and they would have been the same way a year ago too, Violet assigns them homework. Read these books and write a one-page report on each of them. Good delegation. Even though I'll be honest, I personally would be paranoid about missing an important line from a book that didn't make it into that one-page report, but that's my own issues with releasing control that I am working through in therapy.
See, the funny thing is that I feel like if we were ever tasked, like if we were one of the first years and we were tasked with writing a one-page book report, I would literally ask that person to look at our literal 50-page outline of just a few chapters of a book, and I'd say, I don't do that.
I don't do that.
But look who it is. After over a week in Erasia, waiting for his eyes to go back to normal after channeling from the alloy in Deverelli, Professor Zaddy is back. And he feels oddly good. Well, in fact, assuming that extra boost in feeling good is due to him channeling after over a month without channeling from the source. But there is something off about him. His eyes, gold-flecked onyx that we've come to know so well, that emulated Terran and Indarna from Fourth Wing, they are no more. The gold has morphed into a slightly more reddish orange amber. Color watch, I guess. Technically, amber is a fossilized tree resin, but that truly does not roll off the tongue, so color watch it is. While it has so many meanings, amber can mean energy and maturity. So I wonder if like Xaden getting more energy, maturing to the next level of Venom. It also just really works out for the color, so sure. Something else seems to be maturing, and that is Xaden's signet abilities. As we've noted on the show throughout this deep dive, Xaden's quote-unquote type of intrinsic seems to be growing into far more than just reading intentions. He's reading full-fledged thoughts now. And while we're fairly certain this is not Xaden honing his signet behind Violet's back, and instead it is a result of him becoming stronger due to the venonism. But someone pointed out, and I'm so sorry, I searched high and low for the person who DM'd this to us and I couldn't find it, so you know who you are. They pointed out that this possibly is also a repercussion of that one rune that was removed from the ward stone earlier this book. What if that rune limited mind signets for security reasons? And it would also explain why Xaden's power is growing. And maybe it would also explain why Dane's powers are growing to the point that Sloane was like, why are you so powerful, even if it was beyond the wards?
That's my hang up part of that is because their signets are still growing outside of the wards too. And Xaden has spent a lot of time already outside of the wards with his signet.
I think it is Venom as well. And I also want to point out the throne scene last book. If that was Xaden speaking into her mind using a full-fledged intrinsic power, that was before any venom or any ward was nixed off. So I love this idea, but I do agree with you. I think it's definitely venomism.
I think that it was actually Violet walking into Xaden's mind. And this connection that they share is because of both of their second signets. But back to the scene, because our favorite squad is calculating how this mission to search the Isles for the 7th Dragon Den will go. And they're coming to a difficult realization, with leadership insisting they must report back, which means flying back to Basgiath in between every Isle stop. There is no feasible way they'll be able to search the Isles in the limited amount of time before the Orician wards completely fall. Back in January, Mira reported that Oricia's partial wards have 6 months tops. And after that recent battle brief where we learned that the Venom are strategizing to position around it, preparing for the fall so that they can, swoop in, this is really bad. That deadline is fast approaching. Our squad is running out of time to find the 7th Dragon Den and convince them to help aid in this war, which includes fire breathing on the Orician Wardstone to properly ward it with all 7 dragon types. Even if they only use Deverelli as a base and don't keep going back to Navarre to report back, it's too much wasted time flying back and forth. Just going to Deverelli and back to Basgiath took 8 days. And now they're looking at 4 other main isles, plus a dozen minor isles that border the Cerulean Sea. Fun fact, the Cerulean Sea isn't even on our book maps. It's that far south, I assume, there. And also, of course, the isles aren't on there because Rebecca explained it would have been too many spoilers before we got to that part of the book. Add in the Griffins who can't fly for too long of periods or manage strong headwinds, there is no way they'll be able to accomplish this by their deadline. Then piling on even more, Xaden's return brings a new sense of urgency for Violet as she realizes he truly is running out of time now that his eyes are permanently amber. She understands it's inevitable he'll pull again because it's something out of his control, and who knows how bad the progression will be next time. Even this time, she was worried that he was going to turn ASOM, and she knows, again, it's only a matter of time at this point.
Not to mention, this projection is if it all goes swimmingly to plan. Halden could so easily come in and say, "Well, I didn't like flying straight to Athbean in my little basket, so we'll only fly halfway today." This plan is so beyond inefficient. Like, you and I are both very efficient people. This makes me break out in hives. Like, this is horrible. This might be my worst nightmare, and that says a lot about me. So ever the rebel and more desperate than ever to find a cure for her man, Violet states that they go against orders and go from isle to isle rather than reporting back to the scenarium between trips. Thank you! Again, it's like leadership is trying to stall time and not find the Irids for as long as possible. Whether that's a conscious thought of theirs or not, I'm leaning towards it is because this is just so wildly inefficient. There's also a huge risk to this defiance, though. When they return, they will be court-martialed. Now, maybe it is hard to court-martial the group that does find the 7th dragon breed, who can possibly save the entire continent. Sure,
we'll go with that reasoning. It's like they have to tell themselves that because this plan is way better, even if it means fucking the rules. They're banking on efficiency and success to be the ultimate measure of the mission. So they're going to take the risk and focus on that outcome versus making reporting back such a high priority.
Now, if you're unfamiliar with military lingo like I am, you might not know what court-martial means. And I finally looked it up after 3 books of hearing it. So here it is. It is a military legal proceeding where you will be on trial for offenses against military law. And it's pretty safe to say that the people sitting on the other side would be all too happy to punish Violet and Xaden in probably very bad ways. But this is worthwhile for so many reasons. We only have a few more months left, like Lexi said a few moments ago. The reporting back between missions would take over 5 months, and that's not including the minor isles. But because it's Violet, there's also this other hidden reason too. With Xaden's eye color changing, this is a wake-up call for her to hustle. She was hoping for Xaden to just stop pulling from the source, and he would no longer be progressing, and it would give her time to find a cure. This is Delulu Violet, and I think she's come to terms with that. With him pulling in Deverelli, though, and his eyes now permanently appearing to be amber instead of gold, that ticking clock of Xaden being able to deny the call of power is not able to be ignored anymore. She doesn't have 5 months to waste. And while she doesn't say this in her inner monologue, I also imagine one reason she doesn't want to be coming back and forth to the continent is she wants to be on places where it is way harder for Xaden to pull. There's no magic on the Isles. He wouldn't be coming back to places where there is magic. That temptation wouldn't be as strong. So not only is going from isle to isle way faster, it also gives Xaden as much time on unmagicked ground as possible.
Bodhi insists to Violet that Garrick needs to come on this mission too. And no, not because he's a distance walker. That very useful signet on these travels will be of zero use going to Isles without magic, and he can't distance walk. By the way, can you imagine being him and having to do all of this goddamn traveling?
You and I would be like breaking out in hives. He would just be catatonic.
It's just like, oh, I know it's such a better way, but I can't use my signet because I can't wield on these goddamn islands. But the real reason for him to be coming on this mission is just in case things go bad with Xaden and he progresses before they can find a cure. And no, it's not for Garrick to be a babysitter like he had been previously doing. Garrick needs to come in case he needs to do what Violet can't. While it's not outright said on the page, I definitely take this as a kill Xaden. This terrifying point of Bodhi's is made all the more clear when a second-year cadet signet sparring with the new wing leader of Second Wing, who is a fire wielder. This girl is not wielding, she's not defending herself, and Professor Carr is screaming at her that she needs to do something. She does something. She splays her hand wide on the mat and pulls directly from the source. Fuck! This is bad. She just turned Venin right in front of everybody's eyes. Or, as Violet has to wonder, was she already Venin and she gave in to the pull of the power beneath her? We'll never know. And it's really spooky realizing that's part of the point, that we just don't know. I personally don't think she was already Venin, and this is her turning Venin, because Xaden would have been able to sense her, or he should have been able to sense her, and he wouldn't walk away from Violet knowing a Venin was in their midst. This also made me reflect, we were giving the Writers Quadrant a hard time a few episodes ago about not practicing fighting with their signets before. And it makes me wonder if this is another reason why. Basgiath has been needing to hide the fact that Venin exists, so they eliminate pushing cadets like this and risking exposure of the secret where they literally turn right then and there. I'm kind of leaning toward that now. I also want to note that it's Panchek who yells at Carr to take care of this. We've discussed how we don't think Panchek is Venin himself, but now in hindsight, with knowing he's involved with the Venin, here he is playing both sides. Then there's also a lot of questions among readers about how a Venin pulling from the source is even possible behind the wards. And it's a good question. Venin and the wards is going to be a future archives segment, so I'll hold off on the details to explore then. But for now, we learned from Jack that it is indeed possible to turn and pull from the source within the wards. That's what Jack did. That's what the second year is doing right here as well. The Navarre wards dampen the Venin's power. They still have power. They can still feed, but they are weakened and definitely not at their full strength.
All right, everybody, we are about to jump into a montage, but that means we've got to be hydrated first. And if you know us, our favorite hydration solution is Element.
This is episode 6, which means you've been listening to us at Fantasy Fangirls for a moment, and that means you also know we love Element. Not only does it help you hydrate, but every sip really does feel like a treat. Element is a zero-sugar electrolyte drink mix and sparkling electrolyte water born from the growing body of research revealing that optimal health outcomes occur at sodium levels 2 to 3 times government recommendations. Each stick pack delivers a meaningful dose of electrolytes free of sugar, artificial flavors, or other dodgy ingredients.
I've gotten my entire workout studio, especially the head coaches there, all hooked on Element. It's amazing. I love it. Literally last night after I got back from a HIIT workout, I had grapefruit, which is starting to become into springtime favorite because I am so over winter and I want it to feel like spring. Anything that's in the sparkling can form is my favorite type of Element. I love it.
Right now, Element is offering a free sample pack with any purchase. That's 8 single serving packets for free with any Element order. It's a great way to try 8 flavors or share Element with a salty friend. Get yours at drinklmnt.com/FFG. This deal is only available through our link. So you have to go to drinklmnt.com/FFG.
It is time for another montage.
10 agonizingly slow days later, Quest Squad is finally ready to go. With a few additions to Quest Squad, Traeger and Marin. Traeger has healing training, so he'll definitely be useful. And they need to keep an even number of dragons and griffins in case they need to split if needed. So I'm guessing, as much as I love Marin, I'm not sure if I'd be able to make a steadfast argument for her joining besides needing even numbers. So she makes 10 total. So if they need to split off, it's 5 and 5.
I see Violet looking towards Kat and being like, hey, we need to add another Griffin Flyer or 2 more Griffin Flyers. Who do you want to bring? And she was like Traeger and Marin. And also they're both in their squad. So it makes sense that like they're highest on the trust status. I just want to know what Marin's gift is. And also Traeger's, because I guess Traeger is a healer in practice.
Yes.
It doesn't seem like his gift involves healing. So what, I mean, Traeger will never know because he be dead. But Marin, I'd love to know what her gift is.
I want to know Drake's too. She also has Drake. So
that's true.
Yep. Speaking of Drake, luckily Mira's arriving back from personal leave just in time to head out. So
when you read that for the first time, did you think she went off with Drake and they went and had like a little vacation? Because that's what I thought.
No. Oh. I thought Mira was going through some shit and she needed to go find herself.
Meanwhile, I'm like, they went on a couple's vacay.
They are not there yet, Nicole. I cannot believe you think that they have already hooked up by the end of this book. Like, no.
They have broccoli to bond over. They have a bottle of wine to get drunk and fuck for the first time over.
So, with the gang all here, bags packed, plans made, on this first Saturday of March in the early morning at the Basgiath flight field, time to hit the road. Skies. The plan is for the first stop to be Umbriel, but little does Halden know that they're not coming back to Basgiath after this trip to Umbriel. Remember, Basket Bitch has to come too because he's royalty and the only one some Isles will speak to, like Deverelli. I'm realizing right now he would probably be okay with this plan so he doesn't have to be in a basket going to and from the entire flippin' world. This diversion from the scenarium's order is hush hush, though. Never mind the fact that they've got gigantic packs that seem suspiciously like they might need to bring way more than whatever is necessary for a trip to Umbriel and only Umbriel.
But hold up, there's another quick change to the roster. Halden, your useless ass is out. And Arik, your way more useful than we even know ass is in. After getting the Halden-caused Halden-level problems behind the scenes from Violet 10 days ago, Arik has come to the conclusion that he has to come on this quest as the royal representative. This is not at all Arik falling on the sword, making a big declaration. This is him very reluctantly stepping into the role he continually will be thrust into. Arik left his royal fam bam behind and the duties along with it to be a dragon rider and make a difference. He never wanted to flex the prince card. He wants to be a rider, he wants to fight, and most likely die in this war. He's enjoyed blending into the crowd. But as the way he sees it, his wishes are not more important when it comes to the bigger picture. Reason 1,000,001 why he would make a better king than many people. He knows Halden can't keep his temper together and will only continue making things hard on a good day and set them back at a major disadvantage in this war on a bad day.
Or get them killed like he almost did in Deverelli.
Yeah. Oh, he got one person killed, that's for sure. I also wonder if Arik saw something in his precog that involved Halden doing something really stupid. And back during Signet sparring, Arik asked Violet if she was in over her head, to which she said no and meant it. I do wonder if he saw something with Halden going on this mission that resulted in Violet finally being in over her head, or he might have just seen himself going on the mission and knew that's what needed to happen, because we don't fully know how his signet works, if it sees a possible outcome or if it sees the outcome.
Yeah. While I think he would have accepted his necessity to come on this mission without his precog, I do think he saw something that solidified it. Like you're saying, whether it was Halden completely fucking things up and he knew that he had to fix that by going instead, or that he saw himself going on this trip.
Yeah. Aside, I love that Violet, after being a little bit, fighting Arik on his decision, she instead concedes and says that he's allowed to make his own choices. This is exactly what she was talking about with Sloane and Liam making his choice that, resulted in his death, but it was his choice nonetheless. Way to learn, Violet. However, there's one major hiccup. Halden doesn't know that Arik is alive and Arik. He knew his brother Cam was missing, and Halden, and I'm assuming his guards with Halden, were looking for Cam in brothels and gaming houses, and he was nowhere to be found. Side note, Halden was in charge of this mission, at least that's what I can infer by this, to go find Arik. And if so, do you think he purposefully was looking in stupid places, or do you think this is just more character insight to how selfish Halden is, that he wouldn't stop to think about where Arik or Cam is? He instead is like, well, I would be here, so that's obviously where Cam is too. I'm definitely leaning towards this, if you can't tell.
Me too. Because the way he pleads with Violet to look after Arik, there's this little glimmer of big brother concern. So I think he really has been worried about his brother and hasn't wanted to lose a second brother. He's just a selfish butt-face who only looks where he would go. I also just love the little note about how Arik, he's not just pretending that he's Arik anymore. Like, he's really taken on this Arik identity for himself. He is no longer Cam, even when he is going as a royal representative. And I just love that he made that choice for himself.
Seeing his younger brother walking out of the mist to kick this douche canoe prince ass off the mission, and surprise, he's a dragon rider. Yeah, it is shocking to say the least. I do so tinily, smidgen, itty bitty bit sympathize with Halden because, like you said, he has been looking for his brother. Now, whether that is out of royal duty or out of actual fear that his another brother could be dead is honestly something I don't think we'll ever know. But you do bring up a good point that he does look at Violet and he's like, he comes back. Like, I mean, I'm paraphrasing massively, but he is worried about the safety of his brother.
This all also goes back to how I was comparing Halden the basket bitch to these powerful dragon riders in episode 4. He might be the heir to the kingdom and believe himself above everybody else, But that's just not the reality with these writers. Just a few pages ago, Xaden was making fun of Halden and taunting him about scurrying into his little basket. And Halden's cheeks reddened because, yeah, he is an ass who deserves to be shamed. But what a power check on Xaden's part. Then comes in his little brother, where it's like, holy shit, you're a dragon rider too. Not only is Violet in agreement that Arik can keep himself together and be a trustworthy member of the squad, but he can also keep up in the skies, which is something that Halden would never be able to do because he is not a dragon rider. He does not have that kind of power. Totally random, but I love these descriptions we get of Mulvik, Arik's sapphire blue clubtail who has a scar down his snout. Makes me think Mulvik really has seen some shit and is an experienced battle dragon. Not surprising for Arik to be bonded to him.
What I would give for an Arik and Mulvik bonus chapter. Just to, like, I loved seeing Ree and Fiergs and Imogen and Gleans. Like, I love seeing their bonds and their dynamics. And to see Arik and Mulvik would be so delicious.
I know. But I will take that after we get Riddick and Eotrum's threshing story.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Get ready for all the flying. Quick shout out to I call it the travel music part of the playlist, because I believe they'd be so bored with nothing to do. I just can't believe how bored they must be after all these hours of flying, or how sore their butts are. Yes! But I will say, at least Violet has Taryn to keep her entertained by reciting his entire family tree up until the Great War, which takes a whole 8 hours. Wow! And the Great War is when Thoreau was the first black dragon to bond. Now, whether Thoreau bonded with a member of the first six or not, we don't know, but I assume yes. Also, I tried to find any meaning behind the name Thoreau and struggled to find anything of note. It's French. That's all I got.
Pause, because Rebecca Yarros shared that dragons or their newly bonded riders may give the record keeper the wrong name to fudge Biscay's records and hide the fact that some marked ones are direct descendants. This has made a lot of readers wonder if Taryn is one of these dragons, specifically because we get so much mention of his ancestors. There's variations of the theory that he is lying about his ancestors and bringing it up so often to really emphasize that it's not what it actually is, or he is emphasizing his black dragon line so much as hints to Violet to uncover the truth, which may lead to the possibility that she has 3 signets, because not only is she bonded to 2 dragons, but one was previously bonded to a direct descendant. And the idea is that either Naolin is her direct descendant, or Kaori's records are incorrect and Naolin is not Taryn's one and only previous rider. I personally have a hard time getting on board with these speculations that Taryn is hiding something about his lineage, like other dragons are clearly known to do. For starters, he has been only one of 2 black dragons on this continent. He and Coda can't exactly blend into the dragon crowd or pretend they're not the big, rare, badass battle dragons that they are, like other more common dragon colors would be able to do. There's also the fact that Rebecca has made it so clear writers don't have 3 signets because she needs to check people's powers. Violet is already extremely powerful, and 3 signets would be a little too much and not as good of storytelling. So I believe all Taryn's emphasis on his lineage is part of his character development. Yep. He has a big ego. He thinks he's better than other dragons. He is loud and proud of his family history, and he will tell you all about it. Hence why we get so much about who he descends from. It's a running theme for his character and offers a nugget of world building for us about the history of the Black Dragon Den.
We didn't really have this, but I've heard stories about like a grandparent who like sits down with the family tree and like walks through everything when a kid is like, I don't give a fuck. Like, so I see it very similar to that style dynamic. It is over 10 hours to Athbean, rest for a day. Then a full day of flying to Corden, rest for a day. Then 16 hours straight to Deverelli, where they rest for 2 days. Then it is 12 hours straight to Umbriel. You guessed it. It is travel math time. How far have they traveled in full from Besgaeth to Umbriel? Over the course of 8 days, they've flown roughly almost 48 hours of those days. That's not including any of their rest time. That's just straight flying, which in our travel math of Griffin speed of 31.8 miles per hour is 1,526 miles or 2,456 kilometers. Or because I learned my lesson with stair math and I'm not going to do it in Empire State Buildings instead. So it's roughly the same distance as it would be from Denver to Charlotte, North Carolina. So Finally, 8 days after their departure from Besgaeth, they fly to the coast of Umbriel. They first fly past the city of Sonoram, getting close enough to catch the attention of the Isle occupants, but not close enough to risk getting skewered by the crossbolts of the tiered wall defenses. Then they fly another 10 minutes, which is 5.3 miles or 8.5 kilometers, northeastern, landing just inland in a deserted meadow. Why would they need to get the attention of the Umbrielites? Because they need an audience with royalty and cannot safely get past these tiered fortifications without being escorted through. So the plan is to be found in this meadow, which will allow them the opportunity to request an audience with the Isle's royalty. But they flew a little bit further away to give their crew time to rest before being found. Specifically, Xaden time to rest, because he is their chosen warrior and he needs as much sleepy bye time as possible.
While the members of Quest Squad make camp at their chosen location to wait for Umbriel's guards to come for them, Mira and Violet have an interesting conversation about Mira's personal leave she just returned from. Violet notices Mira is wearing a bracelet with knotwork holding metallic beads, and the memory of this bracelet reminds Violet of the smell of parchment, which makes sense considering this bracelet came from Grandmama Niara, who is Papa Sorrengail's mother, and he was a legacy scribe, so the smell of parchment is strong with the Daxton family.
It's time for Crystal Watch. Mira has this bracelet of black tourmaline beads. Black tourmaline is also known as a grounding stone and is a symbol of protection. I found one site that even calls it the energetic bodyguard. This feels so appropriate for Mira right now. But the question is, why do you think this is such a treasured keepsake? Do you think it has magical properties? Violet sees the bracelet and, like you were saying, she smells the smell of parchment and just seconds before she looks away. Could this bracelet bring you back to a time where you felt safe or where you had the feeling of safety?
I believe it's just more like a memory triggering because it makes her remember when she was super, super young and did spend some time with Grandmama Niara. So it's a little nod to us readers that Violet has met this grandmother before, even though she doesn't remember her.
I agree with you that it doesn't bring you back or anything like that, because I agree with you on that. I do think that there's a possibility of this having magical properties. What that is, I don't know. But we do know there's crystalline gems that amplify minor magic, so maybe this is one of them?
Maybe. It's interesting because very few people without the Dragon Rider abilities have access to any kind of magic. That is why runes was outlawed, because they did not want that magic to be dispersed among regular people. So I don't see why a scribe would have a magical bracelet. Maybe that's me just being a little bit too logical in this universe, which I have been wrong before, but I do think that there is very limited other magical artifacts that are not runes and whatnot.
I'm just going to point out what was on Papa Sorrengail's research that was locked.
Runes. But there's no runes with this. You were talking about like crystallized gems that have magical abilities.
There's no runes that we know of. Violet only peeked at it. There could be like runes hidden in the beads or something like that. You look like you think I'm full of shit. Anyway, I looked up the name Niara, and it means with the utmost purpose. I definitely think this is a clue that we're going to have something from Niara that's going to be super, super important. But I don't know what it is.
Well, let's talk about this Grandmama Niara, because it takes Violet by surprise big time that Mira went to visit her. We went over why Mira traveled to see their estranged grandmother last episode. It's along the lines of searching for family connection and potentially this legacy she's inherited. Mira feels left out among the Sorrengail siblings since their parents died. Boy, oh boy, though, did she get some interesting answers from Niara up in Lucerish, which is the northwesternmost province in Navarre and can be pretty isolating and cold. Violet has been under the impression their paternal grandmother stopped talking to their parents before she was born because she doesn't remember her at all, thinking it has something to do with their dad marrying their mom. Their parents never spoke of the Daxton family. But Mira corrects her, giving as little information as possible. No, their parents were the ones who ended communication with Grandmama Niara, and it happened when Violet was a toddler, quote, right around the age where her hair was coming in thick enough to pull into a little ponytail. Violet picks up on what Mira's not saying. During her visit to Niara, she learned what happened to cause the divide between the families. But when she pushes, Mira skirts around the topic and insists Violet needs to go to Le Cherish. In other words, she needs to hear it from their grandmother directly. This conversation is so thick with foreshadowing, especially given the timing of it here in Umbriel, right before Violet sees the High Priestess and hears the first about dedication and her chosen path. Not to mention seeing a young girl with half silver hair just like hers. The way Mira brings up Violet's hair, seemingly in such an innocent way here, but then it ties directly into why the families don't speak anymore, it really makes you lean in as you read. Even though Mira doesn't know about Violet's hair turning half silver when she was dedicated, as we'll find out in chapter 33 when she's confused about Violet telling her about the other girl with hair like hers. Mira has always thought it grew in this way, so she doesn't know yet the connection to Violet's hair and her partial dedication, although she does know that the partial dedication is what caused the divide between the families. While it will be a time before we find out what exactly Niara told Mira, we get so much show don't tell in the scene that it makes Mira extremely uncomfortable. She looks at Violet with worry and dread, in addition to being super tight-lipped. We'll learn that Mira is acting this way because she was told the truth about the attempted dedication for Violet. When they were young, she and Brennan spent a summer with Grandmama Niara, and when their parents returned, Niara stopped talking to them. So technically, she is the one who stopped speaking to them, but that's because of something their parents did. While they were away, Papa Sorrengail took Violet to Umbriel to dedicate her to Dune, which is an outlawed practice to do on children in Navarre. Mira is nervous around Violet since she returned from learning this knowledge because one of Violet's possible paths is that, quote, the heart that beats for her or within her will do the wrong thing for the right reason, reach for unspeakable power, and turn dark. With this unclear wording, it'll end up being Xaden who turns Venin. But this episode is not the time for us to parse through those details. The point here is there's tension between the Sorrengail sisters. Mira is upset and feels isolated that their fathers left the books only for Violet. And now she is keeping a big secret about Violet and is waiting and watching for her sister to turn Venin. Meanwhile, Violet is holding on to their father's words from his letter, how she can only trust Mira. So she's trying to bring her into the fold by sharing their father's research. But Mira is too hurt after being excluded, and she also just genuinely doesn't have interest in things like bird migration or moths.
Real bummer, because that would be fascinating. Rise and shine, Quest Squad. It's time to get captured. Waking up to the sounds of soldiers creeping up on Xaden and Violet, she throws back the blanket just as Xaden brings the edge of Violet's dagger that he sneakily slipped off her while under the blankets to the soldier's throat. Well, the soldiers were definitely not expecting that. It appears to be a couple dozen who have come to retrieve the crew. Well, really kill the crew, but Umbriel, that seems to just be semantics.
Violet notes that they sent an entire platoon to greet them, which from military terminology means between 20 and 50 soldiers. And Taryn observes that there are an additional 2 full companies of cavalry lurking in the hills. A cavalry are soldiers mounted on horseback, and this company size can range, but we'll go with the average of about 70 soldiers in a company. So there are 140-ish additional soldiers on horseback here that our crew can't see. Dang, they really brought the whole gang to approach the Firebringers.
And they still get their asses kicked. Luckily, the full fight seems to not really be on their to-do list, but upon Quest Squad requesting an audience with the Queen, that's an easy, nope, you're not gonna get that. You see, she does not meet with people who are unworthy of her presence, and given that these soldiers easily walked up on the camp, they're clearly not worthy of an audience with the Queen. Well, hold your literal horses there, soldiers. Satan had a blade to your throat, and you're the leader of this mission. Seems like he already bested you. Dunk! But they have one more trick up their sleeves. Time for the dragons to make an appearance and scare the shit out of them. Well, it worked pretty well, considering one pissed themselves. Good job, guys. Fine. Okay, you can come for a chance to get the audience with the Queen, but not all of you, only half.
Violet strategically selects Xaden, obviously, to be the one for the challenge because he is their best fighter. Auric, the royal representation, to speak for Navarre. Kat, same, but for Boromir. Dane, to be translator, which womp womp on his usefulness when Auric will sweep the floor in the language department. And, of course, Violet, because she is leading this mission. She hates having to leave her sister behind, especially after the awkward conversation that they just had where Mira doesn't really feel valued with Violet right now, as well as their second best fighter, Garrick. But Violet's out of spots, and Mira does completely understand. She might be Violet's biggest protector. There might be some tension between them right now, but she also recognizes her little sister as a leader. And I love her encouragement that it's okay she can't come. She understands why Violet made the selections that she did, and she trusts her sister in that regard. So this leaves Mira, Garrick, Drake, Marin, and Traeger, who will have to stay behind.
I like how Marin wasn't even on the list, like, as a possibility. And Traeger, too. Traeger's the only one where I'm like, oh, he could have been pretty helpful. But it's not like he could do any kind of healing or anything like that while they're in the midst of the queen.
I would probably have picked Garrick or Mira for sure. or Drake. Sorry, Traeger and Marin.
Instead of, like, who? Dane?
Well, in hindsight, like, I understand why she chose him in this instance, but really, come on, Eric. That's when you raise your hand and be like, hey, I can kind of count as two people here. To Estelle we go. Estelle is the capital of Umbriel, and it's less than a 20-minute flight inland for the dragons. However, it takes 2 hours for the cavalry to cross the steep terrain to the heavily fortified city. Unlike the crossbolts in Deverelli, the crossbolts in this city can swing in multiple directions, making it quite clear this place is constructed to fight dragons, even if it's been centuries since they've been here. Although it's kind of funny how when the dragons arrive here and growl at the soldiers manning the crossbolts, they just like lift their hands up from the weapons and it's like, nope, just sorry. In actuality, though, all jokes aside, I'm sure they were expecting this dragon party and were under orders not to fire at them, but it's still a nice little visual in my head. The cavalry captain ensures they get passage within the defensive walls so they have a chance at an audience, which Violet makes a note about crossbolts being within the walls too, and her father didn't mention that in his research, leading Violet to believe, and me too, that he never got within these walls to be able to take note while he was doing his research 30 plus years ago. But it is my understanding that years later, he did get this far with toddler Violet because they went into the temple to dedicate her.
I do always love when Violet is introduced to a new culture. She looks at them very neutrally and she sees what they're doing that Navarre can learn from. She doesn't automatically think we're the best. She thinks, oh, what are they doing right that we can absorb, which is such good leader thinking. Here she notes that there are soldiers within the walls of the fortress, making it so that one soldier through this little, fortress opening can hold off dozens trying to get into the fortress with ease. And it's like, yeah, that would be super helpful in a war where they are extremely outgunned, outmanned, outnumbered, and outplanned.
Our half a quest squad is escorted through a gate toward the challenge arena, despite soldiers not wanting them too close to their primary temple. But too bad, because here we are. They're led to an open plaza in front of the largest temple Violet and probably any of her companions have ever seen. Each of the 6 wide pillars that are holding the front are carved with a different symbol for tools of warfare: sword, shield, fire, water, claw, and book. And then there is a sculptured tribute to Dune, where she has a sword pointing in their direction as they enter the plaza. What a sight to behold. All I can picture is the Aragona statues in Fellowship of the Ring when they're floating down the boats and they're seeing like those 2 really big pillars.
I also love that book is one of the symbols of warfare. Like, it shows that this Isle of War is so much more than just, I can't help but think, and this is kind of a dunk on Brennan, but you know how Brennan, and I'll even throw Xaden under the bus here a little bit. Back in Iron Flame, they're like, weapons will win this war. Meh, not knowledge, not books, weapons. And here is literally the Isle of War saying, no, books are really important. So throwing them under the bus with a minor L. I do want to take a moment and talk about this symbol for Umbriel. It is 2 crossed swords that are gripped in the center by a claw, which is very similar to Navarre's. Quote, they have a claw in their symbol, suggesting a common origin. This is also one of the other things that Taryn's like, don't think about this now. We can think about this later. And then, of course, Violet never does because there's like 50 of those in this single chapter stretch. It drives me crazy. Why would Navarre's symbol and Dune's symbol suggest a common origin? And when I think of claw in this world, I immediately go to dragon. Like, that makes a lot of sense. Why does Dune, goddess of strength and war, have a possible dragon claw in the center, especially when dragons haven't been seen in Umbriel in centuries? So all I can think of is, was Dune herself a dragon rider, or was Dune a dragon? That feels personally like a little bit of a stretch, especially given how dragons paid no heed to their puny gods. This also could mean that Dune and Amari were connected to the dragons in some way. I'm stretching. What are your thoughts?
I am still really not convinced that the gods are tangible. Now, I know that there is some magic with them, being dedicated and cursed by the gods and things like that. But I really don't think that they would be tangible where they would be dragon riders or dragons themselves or something like that. What I envision is that when this emblem, way, way, way back when in ancient times, they looked up to the dragons as the ultimate symbol of strength and power that is necessary to bring into a war. So they really saw them as symbols of war, much like Navarre now does.
So what if the two swords and the dragon claw in the middle is to symbolize the bond between dragons and humans and how it is warfare? That's what the Basgiath War College is for.
Yes, and even going a step further, I think that this would have been way before the Great War when there was that official alliance between human and dragon, because there are little hints that there were dragon riders before the first 6. They were just the first successful dragon riders. Exactly how that is defined, we do not know. So I could see this being in ancient times. There was a dragon and rider who bonded and was the ultimate symbol of war. Again, way before the Great War 600 years ago. Especially because there are also mentions that there has been a king before who was a dragon rider, but I don't think it was within the last 600 years. I think that it was an ancient king that we've also got little tidbits about. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's good. This is also nice foreshadowing because at the very, very end of this book, Brennan will note that Violet's marriage certificate or marriage license, I'll call it, it carries this very symbol of Dune.
Uniformed guards filter in behind our crew and blue-robed attendants rise up on the temple steps. But wait, all of these attendants have silver hair! Despite being different heights, shapes, genders, and skin tones, their silver hair is as uniform as their blue robes. I remember reading this for the first time and being like, no way, no way. But even more interesting is that when a group of children make an appearance, Violet spots a girl no more than 10 years old with a silver-tipped braid, just like Violet's hair. Violet has never seen anyone with hair like hers before, whereas silver on the bottom half. No matter how much she cuts it, it simply grows like that. As a fandom, many of us, including Nicole and I, speculated that Violet's half-silver hair was a result of the illness that almost took her mother's life while she was pregnant with Violet. Lots of theories related to venin and how the silver-tipped hair was a connection between the venin and Violet. But here we see there is a whole other story to Violet's hair. And while we won't know the truth about it for a while, we get hints in the scene that help put the puzzle pieces together. I can absolutely appreciate Violet's longing to know the truth behind her hair in this moment. She has never been able to explain it. And here is a child with hair just like hers in a sea of people with completely silver hair. A middle-aged general who turns out to be the commander of the guard and the high priestess make their entrance to go through the process of getting an audience with their queen through coordinating this trial by combat. What's more, the high priestess has Dune's emblem tattooed into her forehead. A forehead tattoo? Silver hair? Who else do we know that has a forehead tattoo and silver hair? Our evil villain bestie, Theophany.
Miss her!
So real quick, let's rewind with what we know about all of this, or at least an abbreviated version, because this will definitely be a later archives segment. Attendants of Dune perform a ritual of sorts, which is called a dedication. The truth is, we don't know much about dedication yet. So if you're confused about the process and what exactly it means, don't worry. You're in good company. We just don't know yet. Then we can't forget chapter 52's epigraph that says, quote, dedicating oneself to temple work isn't just a noble pursuit. Becoming high priest or priestess is the closest most of us will get to touching the power of the gods. The rest are riders. This infers there's some power bestowed upon dedicated servants of a god, but we don't know any more about it. Only that when you turn, like Theophany does, you're cursed by the goddess, which is how Theophany will be killed by the stone from the Temple of Dune. When one is dedicated, their hair becomes silver. We can infer that there is some kind of magic at play with this. For instance, before dedication was outlawed in Navarre in the 200s, parents would dedicate their children to a particular deity's service when they thought the touch of a god would help that child. But in order to be dedicated, you must have a certain future. If your future is uncertain, like Violet's, then the dedication cannot be completed. The process has started, but not finished, hence the half silver hair. And Violet is considered touched by Dune because she does have a partial dedication, but she is not fully dedicated like everybody else here with the silver hair. So bringing it back here to Umbriel, we can deduce that these blue-robed attendants with silver hair are all dedicated to Dune. And the girl with half silver hair is like Violet, where her dedication dedication couldn't be completed because her future has multiple paths. As we'll learn, this is where Papa Sorrengail took Violet to be dedicated and assumably fixed from her chronic illness, which is why the High Priestess here recognizes Violet. They met less than 20 years ago when Papa Sorrengail brought her here to be dedicated.
It is time to get this show on the road. 3 battle-ready warriors enter the temple. One woman who is in the middle and is about the same height as Dane, so roughly 6 foot, and 2 men, quote, tower over her with the same height difference as I have with Xaden. So Violet is around 5'2", and Xaden is 6'4". If the woman in the middle, who we will learn is Queen Marliese, is 6 foot, then the men are taller than 7 foot or 2.3 meters. So tall. They have thick necks, huge arms, and are strapped to the teeth with weaponry. Let's pause for just 1 second and talk about this Queen of Umbriel. Umbriel is known for its hostility being greater than Besgaeth, or as Asher puts it, Besgaeth is child's play in comparison. The only way to gain an audience with anyone of note in Umbriel is to best them in a trial, which means you are worthy of being heard out. Our crew is needing the ear of the highest ranking person in Umbriel. Therefore, in Marlise's eyes, they must best her, and I'm assuming her 2 greatest fighters, in a best of 2 out of 3 match. Then, and only then, will she deem them worthy enough to speak to her. Xaden steps forward, knowing that he was the planned one to fight, and he is put up against Costa, one of the twins. With both of them paying the price to Dune to face off with one another, it is a slice down the arm with blood. As we learn in the Chapter 29 epigraph, in Umbriel, blood is the preferred sacrifice. But hold up! The priestess has chosen that there will be 2 who will be in this fight. And then she slices down Dane's arm. I assume Dane just sounds like, he kind of makes a sound where it sounds like, ow. like that's unexpected. But Dane, you have been chosen. You will fight the other twin. I will give this to Dane. He does accept his role quite quickly and without, any wah. He's like, yeah, okay, cool.
Well, it's like, okay, great, I can be of use here. I'm sorry. I'm not like on the Dane hate train anymore, I promise. I just like to poke fun of him because he's so useless for this Isle trip. Nobody knew that he would be useless because Arik comes through and he's just like, what the hell? I love how the priestess deduces who the other champion should be. Kat is dressed differently than the others, but she's here, so she's of value. And Arik is the prince of his people, leaving only Dane and Violet, who will both be champions too. And then I love Taryn's little quip of, well, this just got interesting.
Taryn's like, let's go, buddy.
He's like, yay, maybe I don't have to be the one to burn Dane. Maybe he'll just die on his own here. Speaking of Violet also being one of the only other people available to be a champion, let's talk about how this high priestess turns to Violet and asks if she chose this path herself. Like we've been saying, Violet's dedication could not be completed because her future is not certain. She has multiple paths to choose from. Hence what the priestess, who I assume is the one who performed her dedication almost 20 years ago, is referring to. Violet recognizes that she chose her own life. Despite her mother forcing her into the writer's quadrant, she purposefully stayed after how much Dane pushed her to leave and go into the scribes. It's like she's always been called to be a writer, not because it was her one true destiny, but because Violet chose it for herself, which I love for our FMC. As a whole, we don't know yet how prophecies truly play a role in this series. Like, does Andarna know anything about this? And that's what led her to know this girl with the mind of a scribe and heart of a writer would be hers. We also can't forget what Taryn says, where it's, I know exactly who and what you are. Are the gods maybe more tangible than I personally believe? And they do direct people's futures. How is one's path already determined for them? And how does one get to choose their own? What's the difference? I have faith that this is all ambiguous for a reason at this point in the series. The concept of dedication and future paths was introduced in this book, and we still have 2 more books to explore and find answers. But then, the High Priestess asks Violet if she yearns for Temple, since usually those who are touched by the gods have such longing that they can't help but return.
Pause. Where have we heard this kind of style of talking? It almost sounds like Venonism, where it's like you yearn to pull from the ground. It's like you are yearning for Temple. That feels like a connection.
All right. Well, I'm quickly going to go back to the Six Talons Tavern in Chantara, where our favorite squad was talking about attending temple. Violet said, quote, "My mother was never temple-minded, which is odd considering you'd think she'd favor Dune. And I preferred to spend what worship time I had in Amari's temple. And once my father died, I frequented Malik's, though I probably spent more time yelling at him than praising him." This is so interesting because Violet stated she went to Amari and Malik more than she did Dune. Could this potentially mean she has more of a connection to Amari or Malik, where she's not yearning for Dune, who she is partially dedicated to, but there is something even bigger at works with it being Amari, who is the queen of the gods? Could it be foreshadowing for Violet as a leader? Maybe that's a stretch, but something to note as we hear mention that she should feel drawn to a temple because she is touched. The priestess goes on to say, quote, I still see us among your potential paths should you decide to take it. Dune will accept you. It is not too late to choose her. This must be her referring to the multiple paths that Violet has, including, quote, the heart that beats for her or within her will do the wrong thing for the right reason, reach for unspeakable power, and turn dark. Is this a high priestess trying to tempt her away from the foreseen path of darkness? Is this a standard thing to say to someone partially dedicated? If Violet goes down this path and Dune accepts her, does she get extra power or protection being dedicated to a goddess? I'm kind of leaning toward this. There's too much surrounding her being touched by this goddess and some other worldly magic at play here where that might end up being beneficial. But to be truly and fully dedicated to a god, what does that mean? We just don't know yet.
Okay, so she says, I still see us among your potential paths. Should you decide to take it, Dune will accept you. There are 6 dragon eggs missing at the end of this book. We do not know where those dragon eggs are going or who sent them. If Violet sent someone, we're assuming Garrick, to give these dragon eggs to Umbriel, which I'll be talking more about later, and then Umbriel gives part of their army, could that be, I still see us in your potential paths? I still see Umbriel as part of your potential path as a leader.
And what's more, when Violet states that she chooses Xaden, which is so poetic given the prophecy that actually involves him, that's when the priestess is like, so be it, and thrusts Violet into the challenge arena to participate along with Xaden and Dane for the fight to get an audience with the queen. So let's run with what you were just saying here for a second, because that would be Violet choosing Xaden, where she does marry him and take up the mantle as Duchess of Tyrrendor, and she still finds a way to choose Umbriel as her path as well, where she is like this leader of their alliance.
Yeah.
Now we know that 3 warriors, including the queen, appeared for the showdown, so we can assume it was always the plan to have 3 champions. But the priestess probably was not expecting Violet to be among them, especially Violet to fight their queen. So this really might be her throwing it up to the gods, letting them decide Violet's true fate or let her prove herself in this test today.
Oh, with everyone having a fighting partner, at least the 3 main ones, let's get ready to rumble! Literally, because it's starting to storm. Everyone turns to their own opponent with 2 tasks. 1, go, fight, win! And 2, focus only on your fight. You hear that, Xaden? Your track record for this is not great after Deverelli when you went all venom on their asses because Violet got hurt. Focus on your fight and only your fight, my guy. Same goes for you, Violet.
And then there's Dane.
And then there's Dane.
And then there's Dane.
Marlise circles Violet and fake lunges twice to try to get her off balance and slip on the rain-soaked stone. But our brilliant fucking woman is smarter than that. Instead, Violet flicks her wrist for Marlise's shoulder, but the queen, who we don't know is a queen yet, dodges the move. Remember how lethal Violet is with throwing a dagger? This shows just how evenly matched Violet is right now. But luckily, in her movement to dodge the dagger, Violet finds an opening, rushing in and swinging at her with her right fist across Marlise's chest. Note she's not stabbing at the queen. Being stabby means probably hitting a vital organ. Slicing can be stitched up. Speaking of slicing, Violet swiper no swiping because Marlise moves backwards, avoiding each of Violet's strikes. Dane is not so lucky because here he shouts out in pain that will absolutely need stitches. Ouchie. Violet finally gets a blow in along Marlise's chest plate, but Violet's retreat was not fast enough. The queen gets in a stab to Violet's ribs so hard she can hear them crack. And thank goodness for a 3-book-long dragon scale armor. While Marlise tries to taunt Violet for them both to remove their armor, that's an easy nope. They will keep them on. Marlise throws her daggers just as Violet hits the deck, missing the blade by inches. Marlise is already running towards her, giving Violet just enough time to prepare to jump back and block the assault, but Marlise still gets a cut into her forearm. Violet doesn't let it bring her down, though. Instead, she brings Marlise down with a move to her shoulder and hip, knocking her off kilter just enough to take her down like a tree. Then Violet is able to pin her wrists behind her back and press a dagger to her throat, just in time for lightning to flash across the sky. I'm sure that was nothing. Woohoo! Go Violet!
But while Violet seems to have Marlies, she is only one of 3 fights happening right now, and it's best 2 out of 3 to get the audience with the queen. Dana's, unfortunately, unconscious with a shoulder wound and Palta's boot against his neck, so he's out, which leaves Xaden as the only other possibility to win his fight. Except, oh shit, Costa has Xaden pinned down and his dagger is slowly lowering inches from Xaden's beautiful face. As far as Marlies is concerned, Violet has 2 options. Number 1, win her fight, but let Xaden die and they lose the 2 out of the 3. Or number 2, help Xaden and therefore lose her own fight, so they both live, but they lose 2 out of the 3. Violet takes secret option number 3, quickly yanks the dagger from Marlies' neck to throw it into Costa's shoulder. Then she immediately replaces the thrown blade with another to press it against Marlies before she can move. This happened in like 0.2 seconds. It's so cool. But hey, thanks for the dagger throw, Vi. Costa's shoulder wound from her dagger gives Xaden just enough time to get the upper hand and win his challenge too. This is such a brilliant FMC move. Violet doesn't accept either option of losing Xaden or losing her fight. She leverages her training and quick thinking to come up with a new out-of-the-box thinking plan. And she really relies on all this training she's been doing in the Writer's Quadrant. All book, people have been commenting on how great she is with her dagger throwing, and it's coming real good handy here. Then I love how Violet is yelling at Marlies to yield, because of course she doesn't want to kill this warrior she doesn't know is the queen. But Marlies is stubborn in her own right and refuses until she sees how Violet wields lightning. Violet is so angry and so caught up in her emotions right now, where we really are picking up on those signals that she is about to wield with power coursing through her and she can't control it. Only when lightning strikes close and destroys something that has been standing for 700 years does Marlies yield, because that's when this queen realizes, oh shit, Violet has magic here somehow, some way, and I can't compete with that. I'm out.
Lightning strikes across the sky multiple times, and no, it's not from Violet climaxing. Violet is dealing with the dilemma of figuring out how to help Xaden. Quote, heat sizzles the rain on my skin. Huh, where have we heard that language before? Maybe any time Violet is wielding in the rain? So it's pretty safe to say that at least one of these lightning strikes, definitely the second one, was Violet wielding. It also could have been both of them. Kara Wells DM'd us on Instagram wondering if this is actually a result of the Irids, plural, as in more than just Andarna. We know that the Irids have been following our crew for quite a while, so maybe having multiple around, Violet's power is getting stronger and stronger. And as we've discussed when Violet has felt that humming of power, especially in Devarelli, we're seeing that again, but this time it is in real life wielding. I wonder if it's because there was already a lightning storm happening and it's easier for Violet to, I'll call it, expedite that power when there is a storm happening and fully wield. We learned that back in Iron Flame. But here, Violet is also closer to the power of Dune. So I wonder if that's another reason she was able to wield easier. It could be all three, Irids, Storm, and power of Dune, and it just like all helped her open up that power vessel. I don't know. When one is fully dedicated or even partially dedicated, we don't really know the powers that they're given, if any, but Violet is probably, maybe, possibly one of the only dragon riders who is partially dedicated. So maybe it's that, I'll call it extra well of power from the gods that Violet hasn't needed to tap into until now.
See, here I was being simple and thinking it was just because Andarna is close to her and that's why she's able to tap into her magic. Yes, Violet is wielding her signet from Tarn, but she's able to channel this power because of Andarna for the same reason that she's able to still communicate with Tarn when it's Andarna who is the Irid and therefore magic.
Hold on, because I was literally just listening to the Irids Isle download earlier today, and Leothin says these dragons have given their riders power. Now, that could be just due to Irids not really knowing how signets and channeling works, but the difference between channeling power and giving power is very specific. So what if Tarn gave Violet power and instead of channeling it into her? Because we know that as older dragons, they still have powers that they can give to their riders. It's just easier for baby dragons to give their powers to riders. Am I making any sense?
You are, except Tarn does not have his power right now. But on that same note, what if when Andarna did give Violet her power back in Fourth Wing, there is some kind of, I'll call it residual magic that is within Violet and why she's able to. So it is, yes, because Andarna is magic, but Andarna bestowed some of her magic permanently to Violet, and it wasn't just the gift of stopping time. But let's just say that this is specifically because of Andarna. The trio's bond are so interconnected, so that when Andarna comes within close proximity to Violet here, she's blending in with the Statue of Dune, that enables Violet to become closer to her major source of power. Yes, even though it isn't Terran, but again, they are so interconnected that it might as well be. Add in the storm that makes it easier for Violet to wield lightning, like you were saying, it's like the perfect signet cocktail for her. But it really does feel so fitting that she is wielding here on the Isle of Dune, the goddess who has touched her. So maybe it's all the reasons. I don't know. But I don't know. I really like this new theory that Andarna gifted Violet magic back in Fourth Wing, and there is still some of that residual magic. And that's also why she can still use her second signet after Andarna leaves. Queen Marlise offers the same alliance that Deverelli did. This crew is welcome to take shelter in their lands and have hunting rights should they need to rest on this isle. But if Umbriel, the strongest and most effective army of the Isles that our quest squad really wants to ally with, if they're going to fight with the continent, they have a steep asking price. The same thing everyone in the Isles craves. Dragons. When she isn't burned alive for such a request, which seemed quite likely there for a second, because if I hadn't made it clear enough yet on the podcast, you don't deal in dragons. That's not how dragons work in this world. Marlise goes on to say they want 12 eggs, 2 of each breed, because they don't want fully grown dragons. They want to raise them from little babies and teach them not to be so headstrong and arrogant as the Navarians have, quote, let them. Honestly, points for Terran for not burning them right here and now. But it's in this moment that Violet realizes the second Crowland uprising tried to get Feathertails because the Isles thought they were malleable, not for their gifts to take advantage of. I've still got Umbriel as a top contender for the unnamed Isle from the second Crowland uprising. I could make a good argument for all of the Isles being the unnamed Isle, and that's part of the fun of this. I love it.
So let's talk about what's missing at the end of this book. It is 6 dragon eggs. It might not be the 12 that Marlise here is asking for, but 6 is still enough to be one of each breed minus the Irids. Marlise says for them to visit again when they're more desperate and when, quote, a dozen eggs aren't such a bad price for, saving humanity and the continent. But at the end of this book, the desperation, it's not that much more on the gas, at least in my opinion. They're down 1 Maven Darkwielder. That's good. Although Xaden's outlook is not looking so great. The only person whose desperation I feel like has really changed drastically is Violet's. So I feel like she is the one who orchestrated the 6 eggs to head off to Umbriel, which might be another reason why she said, wipe my memory, please. I cannot be interrogated for this because this would kill me, like if I was found out. Now, Garrick is also missing at the end of this book. So would Garrick be the carrier pigeon of these 6 eggs? Also, I would love to know how the holding of that would work.
If it is Garrick, he would have to distance walk from Orisha where the dragon eggs were stolen to somewhere like Corden, but then he would not be able to distance walk all the way to Umbriel. So that is one thing just to note as we are talking about it potentially being Garrick. He would have the upper hand of being able to quickly get away from the continent, but not necessarily quickly get to Umbriel with just distance walking because, again, Umbriel does not have magic for him to distance walk to. If we assume that the 6 missing eggs are taken to Umbriel in exchange for an army to help, say, Tyrandor and its new Duchess, does that mean that Terran and Sigale would have fought and killed 4 other dragons and 3 elder dragons to get them? Because I don't feel like they would ever consider the lives of so many dragons to be worthwhile for a non-magical human army. Like, I don't think that Terran would find it extremely necessary for them to need that to the point where he would kill 3 elders. There would have to be some other layer to make it make sense and give it more urgency and strategy.
Killing a dragon, as we learned when Andarna killed Solus last book, it leaves a mark on the soul. So that's a large mark on the soul for them to just casually do. But that also might be why Terran is so tired at the end of the book, is because that mark on his soul is so deep.
I can't wait till the end and we talk all about the missing eggs. Although I will say this makes me wonder if this is too on the nose, or is it maybe just in-your-face foreshadowing? Rebecca does a good job of balancing in-your-face foreshadowing with the super subtleties that make us grasp for anything and everything.
I am going to throw one more theory out that Just a Nerd DM'd us on Instagram. In Iron Flame, it is stated from Terran that, quote, the hatchling's choice transforms the valley back into a hatching ground. It changes the magic. So what he's saying here is when a hatchling is cracks open his egg and go, "Brrr!" That my baby dragon hatching noises. That changes the magic and makes it a hatching ground. So what if the Isles want eggs also, because then when they hatch, it changes the magic, or it changes it so it gives the Isles magic. And I'll even say, like, if they don't know, because that is a really deep Empyrean tidbit of info, if they don't know that is a bonus of having eggs hatch on an Isle where there is no magic, suddenly they might have magic. Maybe it's a catch-22. Maybe it's a surprise, but then suddenly the Isles are a target for venom too.
Yes. I wonder so much about how this no magic in the land works, because Rebecca has said that it comes down to the tectonic plates, because on the continent, there had used to be hatching grounds sporadically all throughout the continent. So maybe that is how it was, like, the magic was seeped into these tectonic plates over time. Let's wrap this up with, despite winning 2 out of the 3 fights and getting their audience with the Queen of Umbriel, our quest squad ultimately comes up short. Sure, they're allowed to rest here in between their search party, which none of them even want to stay on this isle because they're like, I don't like you all people, but no army to aid the continent and no 7th dragon breed here. Little does Violet know, she did get a major puzzle piece to her own mysterious history. And she also will realize this is one of the reasons that her father left her research about this isle, so that she would ultimately come here and learn their secret herself. In this Signet Power segment of the episode, let's move to the power of precognition by turning our full attention to other important foreshadowing moments for the rest of this book, as well as speculations for books 4 and 5.
Dane and Sloane foreshadowing is here. Quote, I lift my eyebrows at the look she shoots him, mostly because I can't tell if she wants to stab him in his seat or, and then Garrick says, fuck. I remember reading this and wanting to just slow clap Rebecca Yarros. It was brilliant writing. I love, because that's what Violet's about to say is, or fuck, but then it's Garrick who says it, and it's just,
in a totally different context.
Yes,
absolutely. I love it. While we're talking about Dane and Sloane, I love how it's Dane insisting she train her signet. There is so much foreshadowing for when he will coach her through using her signet when she has to siphon to save Mira's life, like we were talking about earlier in this episode.
There's mention that Brandon has sent the largest med bag Xaden has ever seen for their next expedition. Oh my God, will this be helpful? Specifically in Hedotus, where Violet will need a very special vial from this med bag to poison the entire triumvirate at dinner.
Bodhi gives Violet 2 vials marked with an S and A, serum and antidote, just in case Violet needs to give the serum to Xaden to mute his powers and control him as a venin, like they had been doing with Jack previously. While Violet won't end up needing to use them on the Isles mission, Xaden will find them and be grateful she is prepared. And Bodhi is just relieved in this moment that Violet has logically accepted what's going on with Xaden, where she recognizes she might need to use the serum on him. Instead of denial, like she probably would have done if given the vials at the beginning of the book, she would have been like, no, I don't need these. And now she's like, yeah, I should probably pocket this just in case.
Well, and Xaden's going to find them without her telling him that she has them in Hedotus. And she's going to feel really guilty at first, but then he's going to be like, I'm so glad you have these with you because this is good.
Rune watch here. We are keeping an eye on how the runes work on the Isles. Mira is now convinced of what she figured out from their trip to Deverelli. Some runes work off the continent, but not all. They're each supplied with a handful of multicolored quartz discs to test. But Violet can't figure out if the amethyst disc with the sun protection rune is actually working, or if it's from the same rune on her dagger. Speaking of which, in the same breath, we learn what another rune does on Violet's dagger that Xaden gave her. Keeps her from getting sunburned. Aw, how thoughtful. And I still want to know what the other ones are.
In her father's books, Violet reads if Eris birds eat the overripe Zakia berries, their beaks turn blue and they drop dead. This is exactly what will happen at the Hedotus dinner. This is how Ferris attempts to poison everyone with the Zakia berries. Xaden says, quote, Tyrandor is safe in Bodhi's hands should I fall. Yet another instance where we are to believe Bodhi is supposed to take over should Xaden be unable to rule Tyrandor. But Bodhi is not in charge at the end of this book. Basically, this is just yet another reason why I believe Bodhi has turned at the end and is venin because he is not the Duke of Tyrandor.
The Cat and Traeger foreshadowing from getting, I don't even know if it's called foreshadowing anymore. It's just right there on the page. From going into the woods to hunt together to the hickey on Traeger's neck. And I just love it so much. And I love how invested Violet and Andarna are in.
We have donned our signet, so now let's tap into our mind of a scribe and examine key epigraphs from this stretch of chapters. We get our first epigraph from Second Lieutenant Asher Daxton. Remember, when you graduate, you are a second lieutenant. So this is him right out of the scribe quadrant. If you are like us, you read the name Daxton and probably freaked the fuck out because we have heard this name before. Colonel Daxton's Guide to Excelling in the Scribe Quadrant. Pause. Let's address a big question in the fandom. No, Colonel Daxton is not Papa Sorrengail because Asher was a lieutenant colonel when he passed and he had already changed his last name to Sorrengail. So odds are that Colonel Daxton is actually an ancestor of Asher. So basically, I see it as Asher has been a descendant of just like excelling scribes, like excelling in the scribe quadrant scribes. There is a possibility that it is a distant ancestor, sure. Or as Jamie Z. Cohen on Instagram mentioned, and this completely blew my mind, there is a possibility that Colonel Daxton is actually Niara. I can so vividly see Violet going to Niara, Grandmama Niara, and saying, "Hello, Colonel Daxton," and then we all just want to scream. Like, that is such a Rebecca Yarros moment.
Especially with the scent of parchment memory. Yes. You know what? I am on board with this. It is Colonel Daxton is Grandmama Niara. Yes. Well, we've already talked a lot about this. I do just want to bring up the big epigraph of, quote, "Guardians are no longer permitted to dedicate children in service to their favorite deity. The decision to serve the gods for life must be made after the age of majority and of one's free will." What's really interesting is that even when they are dedicated on the continent, their hair does not magically turn silver. The high priestess will ask Violet if she also dyes her hair, which must mean that all of them do not have naturally silver hair. So I'm really curious about how this works differently because the Isle of Umbriel is not supposed to have any magic. So how does their hair turn silver? Is it something because Dune really truly does favor Umbriel and the continent does not quite get that same level of magic? I don't know, but just something to point out.
Now, let us step into the archives, where each episode, Lexi educates us all on a world-building topic to help us better understand this world and the magic within it.
Today's archives topic is the three main isles and specifically their culture and trials for newcomers. It seems fitting for us to start with Umbriel, the Isle of Dune. Real quickly, let's go over the general geography. The beaches here are rockier than in Deverelli, with a narrow strip of sand dotted with boulders before it goes into hills of thick vegetation. All of it is that same muted green as Deverelli. The colors here are more muted. Umbriel also has the same stifling hot climate as Deverelli. And also, there is no magic here. Dragons have not been to this isle in centuries, though they certainly have lots of crossbolts here too. Unlike Deverelli, these crossbolts swivel, which makes absolute sense because of how strategic they are here. Cities in Umbriel include their capital and where the challenge takes place, Estel. Their structures here are strategically built so a small number of soldiers can defend their heavily fortified walls against many, many, many soldiers. And we also know of a port city called Sonoram. Moving on to their cultures and beliefs. In Umbriel, they worship Dune, the goddess of war and strength. Papa Sorrengail notes in his research that what Bisgayeth calls treacherous is their idea of primary school. That really goes to show Umbriel here in a nutshell. Dedicating oneself to Dune is a common practice here, leaving many attendants of Dune with silver hair, and they wear blue robes. Umbriel is ruled by Queen Marlise, who does not meet with those deemed unworthy of her presence. She only speaks with those who best her. Defeating their best in combat earns you entrance to court at the defeated opponent's rank, which, yes, let's talk more about this trial by combat to get an audience with Umbriel's court. Umbriel's trial by combat requires one, I believe specifically a newcomer, to prove their worthiness before you can speak with their queen. After an audience with the queen is requested, the strongest warrior is selected. Once both parties have selected their chosen fighter, the high priestess slices the forearm. Their blood is considered payment to Dune and must be done before they may prove their worth. The fighters agree upon a weapon. Everyone must select and fight with the same one. The challenge takes place in the open plaza outside Dune's large temple. It's notable, too, that the stones on the ground are dark, most likely from blood over the years. The fight proceeds until one side yields or is defeated. If more than one group of fighters are present, victory is determined by the most wins on the team. Per their laws, however, there should only be one fight. If you win the fight, you get an audience with the queen. Now we've got Hedotus, the Isle of Hedion. From Umbriel, it's a 13-hour flight for griffins, and the vegetation here is even paler than on other isles, which Violet and Taryn wonder how in the world it's possible to have even less magic here when there's none in the other two isles already. Hedotus demolished original structures on the isle about 150 years ago, turning everything into a collection of exquisitely proportioned neighborhoods, all with central meeting places for markets and gatherings. The rebuild was designed with intention, resulting in a flawless layout and proportioned city, though it did come at the expense of losing history with all of that original architecture. The weather here is a little colder than on the other isles. The capital of Hedotus is Vidiris, and it's on the coast. But surprisingly, this isle does not have a port. The libraries in Hedotus are unparalleled, and their colleges are esteemed for knowledge and learning. Moving into their culture and beliefs on Hedotus, they exclusively worship Hedion, the god of wisdom. They say a prayer to him before meals and offer private confession of their daily errors as a form of sacrifice. Hedotus is ruled by the Triumvirate, which are 3 leaders chosen by election. The leaders are Ferris, Niari, and Roslin. Hedotus is a community built on knowledge and peace, and the isle has no army. They have a long-standing history of neutrality and have never, on paper at least, been a part of a war or aligned itself with any side in any conflict. Citizens of this isle generally have a fear of water because they claim it is unwise to risk the unknown dangers lurking in its depths. That is why they do not have a port. I found this part a little funny.
I do too.
The citizenship test to reside on this isle is similar to the entrance exam for the scribe quadrant, but the scribe test is designed to measure how much a potential candidate has learned, and Hedotus's reads as though to prove how much one has not. I personally wonder if Papa Sorrengail, while he was even temporarily living on this isle for his research, if he had to take that citizenship test.
Oh, I'm sure he did. Yeah.
Let's talk about the trial on Hedotus. To meet with the triumvirate, one must undergo a trial to prove their wisdom. During the trial, the triumvirate wear ceremonial robes and carry jade stones. A decision of worthiness requires all 3 members to place their stone on the table, indicating a unanimous vote. The trial is conducted in front of an outside witness, and the triumvirate members take turns asking questions and determining how wise the response, including judging their intelligence, life choices, and testing their honor. Last but not least, we have Zelna, the Isle of Zanal. Zelna is full of beautiful white sand beaches, green-leafed trees, sparkling rivers, and waterfalls. And unlike the other 2 isles we were just talking about, Zelna has a small current of magic that runs through the isle. Oh, I can't wait to get to this part of the deep dive. Not enough magic to channel or properly shield, but just enough to feel the bonds. So our riders and flyers will be able to finally talk again to their dragons and griffins. The capital city is Zortris, and it's surrounded by a curved waterfall and rivers that split from it, making the city seem almost like its own island. Moving into their culture and beliefs, they of course here solely worship Zanal, the god of luck. To live amongst the Zelni, you must prepare to accept luck as your guide and chaos as your standard. It is ruled by a queen here, and they have always revered dragonkind and griffins. The trial in Zelna is made up of seeing what gifts Zanal has chosen for someone. If someone is willing to play and accept whatever gift the god of luck presents them with without complaint, then they will be granted entrance to the city where the queen waits. If one does not accept that luck determines their fate, that Zanal may gift them with great fortune or take it, then Zanal cannot ally with them. This trial is hosted in an amphitheater and can hold hundreds or even thousands of people. So let's walk through how the trial works. Once the players have agreed to play, a table, single chair, and a canvas bag are brought out. Ooh! A deck of cards is taken from the bag, and each card represents a gift. The cards are spread out face down on the table. Each person pulls the cards Zanal inspires them to choose and receives their gift. Examples of gifts include a bottle of wine, 2 orange tunics, a slap with 2 hands, a rusted steel bucket, a fractured hand mirror, an empty glass box of nothingness, a broken black compass that has to mean something, a kiss, mwah, a gold necklace with a ruby pendant, and the claw, aka little kitty cat, and unfortunately, an arrow to the chest.
Womp womp.
After receiving the gift, a thanks must be given. If multiple people are receiving gifts, no one can complain about any gift you or someone else receives. One also can't get rid of a gift, as it is bad luck to throw away a gift from Zanal. And there you have it, friends, the 3 isles and specifically their trials.
I cannot wait for 2 episodes from now where we get to go to Zelda. I'm so excited. Let us close out this episode with taking flight with our favorite moments.
The classic line from Riddick that has taken the fandom by storm, where he says in response to a Signisan flyer saying, "I don't do second years." And Riddick comes back with, "Good thing I fuck like a third." Go Riddick! I love him and his confidence so much, especially when he goes on to explain how he has it. Once you survive the gauntlet, you're well aware one rejection is not going to kill you. In other words, shoot your shot.
Maybe not like Traeger with shoot your shot though. When Violet has all eyes on her during battle brief, Kat draws attention to herself by saying, quote, "Of all the shops in the merchant aisle, she made us visit the bookstore." Look, she might have been very, Kat about it, but I firmly believe that Kat redirected attention because she noted how Violet felt uncomfortable. I just love their friendship, and that's not something I expected to say.
It's such a little detail about magic in everyday life, but I love it so much. With how Violet opens her archives door to let a crackle of power stream through so she can try to stay awake when she's so tired in class. Can we just praise Garrick for a moment? He is so observant of everything. We got quite the hint at this from Xaden's bonus chapter in Fourth Wing, but here he notes how Violet has been rotated every one of her joints in the last hour. Even if his observation is in vain because Violet and Imogen don't agree with him, he is still looking out for her in his own way.
There is a small, but I love this detail so much about talking about headwind. Marin notes how dragons can take it, and it's Bodhi who notes that griffins cannot. I love that it's no longer the dragon riders versus the griffin flyers. They are truly a cohesive unit, and they understand one another's mounts so much that I just love how that was presented. It was so good. This is kind of a dark thing that I love, but I love that we got a student pulling from the source and going Venin on the challenge mat. Now, we don't know if they were already Venin. We've talked about that. We both don't think so, but it's just such a good reminder for us readers that Venin could be anywhere and we wouldn't know it. It's like this, be on your toes, people.
I love how when Halden is all pissed that Arik is still alive, Mira says, quote, "He could have let you think he was dead." I don't think she'll ever not be better with Brennan over those 6 years.
Everything from this stretch of chapters with Arik, and honestly the next few stretches, especially how he steps in, he's fluent in everything. He makes Dane completely useless. I will never not find this funny. It's so good.
And Darna hiding by blending into Dune's statue, and Violet notices because the statue's eyes flash golden. Just love that little note right there. Oh, so brilliant. Thank you so much, friends, for listening to today's episode 6 of our Onyx Storm Deep Dive.
We will see you again for next Monday's episode 7, where we are covering chapters 34 through 37. The next book series we are covering after Onyx Storm is the Kindred's Curse Saga by Penn Cole. And I'm so excited to have Penn be involved in this coverage. We are going to be starting with book 1, Spark of the Everflame, in May 2025. Link is in the show notes to get the book.
We'd love to give the biggest, the warmest welcome to our newest Iron Squad members.
Welcome to Nikki B, Angel W, Laura, Ria G, Ashley G, Danielle M, Marissa T, Teresa H, Leslie T, Megan S, Donna R, Michelle K, Joelle, Jessica, and Jenna F. Welcome.
We appreciate you so much. And if you're like, hey, I want my name shouted out on the podcast and to be showered with all the love too, join our fan club at fantasyfangirls.com/fan club. The link is also in the show notes.
Thank you, as always, to our resident scribe curator, aka our content researcher, Brooke, and our executive producer, aka our sanity manager, Hayden. We love you guys.
We are very active on social media and posting lots of extra Onyx Storm content, including every week. We have a little mini archives that is an abbreviated version of what I go over this week. We also have trivia from the stretch of chapters every week too. So please be sure to follow us on Instagram and/or TikTok at Fantasy Fangirls Pod. And if you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us so much. We appreciate you.
Speaking of things that help us so much, please take a second to rate and review the show. It takes 5 seconds to hit that 5-star button, hit the follow on whatever podcasting platform you're listening to, or write a little love note in the review section. And please don't just do this for this show. Any podcast that you listen to, you have no idea how helpful it is, and it also just gives us a big smile on our face. And lastly, if your friends also believe that Sig Neeson is super sus, this is a great episode to send to them. So please be sure to share this with all of your Onyx Storm buddies.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.